holding, Bezos Hashem, we are holding Daf Ches, and we're going to start from Daf Zayin Omud Sheni towards the bottom, okay, by the Mishnah. This Mishnah, the Mishnah is called Ein Bains, the Ein Bain Mishnahs. So the Mishnah, the Gemara says like this. The Mishnah says like this: Ein Bain Shabbos Yom Kippurim. There's no difference between the punishment of violating Shabbos to the punishment of violating Yom Kippur. Ella shezeh, by this one, zedoinei b'dei adam. The punishment, you get punished when you mechal Shabbos, you get stoning, skila, which is a punishment by Bezdin, b'dei adam, by humans. V'zeh, but Yom Kippur, if you violate Shabbos, Yom Kippur on purpose, zedoinei b'karis, a person gets karis, he dies young. It's b'dei shemayim. Shemayim will take care of it. So that's the difference between Yom Shabbos and Yom Kippurim. So the Gemara says, "Hali inyan tashlumim zev v'zeh shaben." They would be equal whether you have to pay. What does that mean? What does that mean? What that means is, let's say someone violates Shabbos on purpose by starting a fire and burning down somebody's field. So the halacha is that since you're going to violate the Shabbos on purpose, you only since they're going to punish you anyway by stoning you. So therefore, you don't have to pay for the damages of burning down somebody's field. That's kamle b'derabinle. They get him off with the more severe punishment, and he doesn't have to pay for any monetary damages that he caused. But Yom Kippur would be the same thing, because the Mishnah doesn't say that. That would be the difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur as well. If someone starts a fire on Yom Kippur and causes damage, since Shemayim in heaven, he's gonna die young anyway, he doesn't have to pay for that field. So Hali Inyan Tashlumin Zev Zeshavin, they're both equal. There's no difference between them, because you would think that if Shemayim is taking care of you, fine, but you still should pay the guy that you burnt his field down on Yom Kippur. No, you don't have to pay. Mani Masnisin, who is our Mishnah lining itself with Rabbi Nechunya ben Akanihi. The Tanya we learned in the Brayso, Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana Hoya Oise, he would make as Yom HaKippurim ke Shabbos l'tashlumim. When it comes to paying, Yom Kippur is exactly the same halacha like Shabbos. Ma Shabbos, just like Shabbos. If you do something on purpose and you cause the monetary damage to somebody else, Mischaya benafshoy, you're going to get killed. Bezdin is going to kill you because you did it on purpose. And you don't have to pay him. You don't have to pay the monetary damages. Af Yom HaKippurim, so also Yom Kippur, Mischayev benafshoy, you're chayev with your life, because in Shemayim they're going to kill you. You're potter from paying. New Gemara. Tnan Hosum we learned over there. Now, every time you do chorus, technically, if someone's mechalel Yom Kippur, technically he could get malchus also. Technically, you can get malchus. So what would happen if they warned you and told you, oh, don't be mechalel Yom Kippur. Don't be mechalel Yom Kippur, because if you're going to be mechalel Yom Kippur, we're going to give you chorus. We're going to give you get malchus. So the Mishnah says, kol chayove krisis shaloko. If your chayiv krisis and somehow Bezdin gave you a malchus, don't worry, you're not going to die young. Nifteru midei krisasan. You're potter from dying young, because once you got your malchus, okay, then Shemayim you don't have any debt in Shemayim, and therefore you're potter. Shenema, because there's a pasuk that says, "V'nikla achicha le'einecha." Your brother will be shamed before you by getting malchus. So we darshan kivan shalaka. As soon as somebody gets a malchus, even if he would have been mechayev kares, even though he would have been mechayev kares, he's like your brother. Divrei Rab Chananya ben Gamliel. This is the words of Rab Chananya ben Gamliel. Fine. Comes along. Hold on a second. Comes along. Hold on. Yeah. Comes along Rabbi Yochanan, and he says, Chalukin olav chaveroi alchan Rab Chananya ben Gamliel. The Rabbanan disagree Rab Chananya ben Gamliel, and they hold that even if you would get a malchus, you would still die young. You would still get chorus. Fascinating. So you got malchus, fine. Bezdin gave you malchus, but you would still get chorus. Now that only presumes that every chayev chorus, because you were over alav, you get malchus. That presumes it. Amar Rava. Rava says, it's obvious that Rab Chananya ben Gamliel is being argued by Chaverav, but there are people that disagree with him. Why? Because even though it says Divrei Rab Chananya ben Gamliel, it's not clear if the Rabbanim would argue on him. But Rabbi Yochanan says, the Rabbi Rava says it's obvious that there must be the Rabbanim argue on him because our Mishnah goes according to Rabbanim. Tanina, we learned in our Mishnah, Ein ben Yom Kippur l'Shabbos, El shezeh zedayna b'dei Adam, v'zeh zedayna b'karis. Right? So the difference between Yom Kippur and Shabbos is only one gets karis and one gets skila. If it's true that a chayve karis, if he gets malkus, he'd be potter from karis, then it's possible it's possible that Yom Kippur and Shabbos both have a punishment b'dei Adam. Shabbos' punishment is skila, and Yom Kippur's punishment, you have the choice. Bezdin can give you malchus, and you'll also be potter. So it's both. Technically, Yom Kippur also has a malchus. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, "Haben, you have two answers to this. Truth is, the Rabbanim would hold if you hold that chayve kares can get malchus. The Rabbanim possibly could agree with Rav Chananya ben Gamliel that if you did get the malchus, if you opted for the malchus, you would not die young." But this Mishnah, our Mishnah, is a new Tana. Hamani Rabbi Yitzchak, the Amar, Rabbi Yitzchak holds that Malchus b'chayve karesis like it. There's no such a thing of a chayve kares gets Malchus. You see, if Rabbi Yitzchak holds that you can't give at all a chayve kares Malchus, so therefore, if he does, it's not A or B. He could only get kares. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, the only difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur is one gets b'dei Adam and one gets b'dei Shemayim. The Tanya we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Yitzchak is a Tana. He says Chayav krisis b'chlal hoya. There's a whole bunch of arayos which tells you that if you do miznus with them, you get krisis. And then it says if you sleep with your sister, you also get kares. V'lama yotzes kares b'chayis. Why did the Torah have to say that you get kares if you're mizana with your sister? It's part of all the arayos. Laduna b'kares v'loy b'malchus. It's to teach you that you could only get kares, not malchus. It's dova ha. You ever hear this expression? Something that was in the cloud and it went out of the cloud. Loyim in the cloud yatsa, lamina klo kula yatsa. It comes to teach you that not only is a chaysoi only gets kares and not malchus, but this extra pasuk teaches you that all the arayos you could only get kares and you can't get malchus. So that Rabbi Yitzchak is the opinion of our Mishnah. Rav Ashi says like this, that really the Rabbanim possibly could agree with Rav Gamliel that if there is an option of malchus, you get malchus, then you would be potter from kares. And it's not true that Rav Chananya ben Gamliel has somebody who would argue with him. But even the Rabbanim would agree to Rav Chananya ben Gamliel. Nevertheless, our Mishnah could go according to Rab Chananya ben Gamliel or the Rabbanim, basically saying the same thing. There's Malchus by Yom Kippur, but the point of our Mishnah is Zeh Iker Zedoinoi b'dei Adam. The main punishment of Shabbos was done b'dei Adam. V'zeh, the main punishment of Yom Kippur, Iker Zedoinoi b'kares. Its main punishment is with kares. Yes, if Bezdin says, okay, come here, we'll give you Malchus. If you got warned for Malchus, then yes, you could get away with Malchus. But the main punishment for Yom Kippur is kares. So that's why our Mishnah says the difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur is Zeh b'dei Adam and Zeh b'dei kares. Top of the page, Daf Ches. New Mishnah. Here in Nadarim, it's very interesting. If I have somebody I dislike, I could go over to him and say, I make a neder for your behalf that you're not allowed to have benefit from any of my property. Or if I dislike him, I can say, I can make a neder, I ask you to have any food, any enjoyment of food related enjoyment from me. So that even though that person that you asked never even said a neder, he becomes aser. So I'm the madir, and he becomes the muda, the guy who the neder takes effect, who has to keep the neder, even though he didn't say anything. So, but the Mishnah says, what would be the difference if I go over to somebody and say, you aser, I ask you to have any hana for me, or I go over to somebody and say, I ask you from eating anything in my house. So ein bein hamuda hana mechaber lamuda mimeno mamachal. There's no difference between somebody who is aser to have any enjoyment from his friend to somebody who becomes aser to eat by his friend. Ella drisa saregal, trespassing on the property. If you're aser bahana, then you're not allowed to trespass the property. Suppose the guy has a field out there, you're not allowed to trespass. If I had a field out there, the person I was madir, that became a mudar, he can't trespass the field. The kalim shein oisabem oichel nefesh, and food that it's not food related. For example, to loan him my bicycle. So then that case, only a mudar hano would be asur, but not a mudar from food. He won't be asur because that's not food related item. Points out Rashi, and a very important point. Suppose I normally, this person, if he wants to borrow my bicycle, would normally have to rent it from me. And now he's only asur to me for food, right? He takes the bicycle for free. So technically he's saving money. With that money, he could potentially buy food. So in that case, even a mudar mimena machal would not be permitted to borrow kalim she'ein oisim b'hem oichel nefesh. It's only kalim that are free, and no, I wouldn't rent it out anyway, and nobody rents it out. So it would have been free. He could have got it from me, could have got it from somewhere else. That type of kalim she'ein oisim b'hem oichel nefesh, he's permitted to get from me, only if he's a mudar mimena machal. But if he's a mudar hana, any type of benefit, even if he could have gotten it from somewhere else, any type of benefit becomes asur. So the Mishnah says, but regarding le'inyan kalim she'oisim b'hem oichel nefesh, the kalim that are food related, for example, a pot, an oven, a sifter, zeh v'zeh shavin, both types of mudars are asur. Whether you're mudar hana or you're mudar machal, if you cannot use a keli that is used for food-related items, for food-related preparation. But the Mishnah said, but if you're mudar memena hana, you're not allowed to trespass into his property. So the Gemara wants to know what's wrong if he's mudar hana, he can't benefit. What kind of benefit does he gain for trespassing the property? I'm not halai kapti enoshi. Most people are not strict about if somebody walks on their property. What could be so wrong? So it's not like he's gaining a benefit from me, because I would let any homeless person walk on my field, as you know, it's out there in somewhere in the Catskills. He could walk, and anybody could walk on there. So what kind of benefit that you tell me a mudar hana would be asur to trespass a person's field? Amar Rava says Hamani. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Eliezer. The Amar who said Vitar, even overlooking asur b'mudar hana. If it's a type of situation where normally I would overlook, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that would still be prohibited by somebody who's mudar hana. If somebody is a mudar hana, means he can't have any slight benefit. Even normally, I would overlook anybody walking on my field. That person will still remain asur to walk on the field. So you have a bunch of halachas over here. If it's a rentable item, whether you're mudar hana or mudar machal, you're always asur, because you're saving money, you can buy food with it. If it's a non-rentable item, so then if it's a non-rentable item and it's a type of thing that's not used for oichel nefesh, then it's only asur if you asur the mudar hana, but not if you asur the mudar mimena machal. And our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Eliezer that even if it's normally you would overlook, it'd still be asur by a mudar hana. Once we're on the topic of nedarim, the Mishnah says like this: there are two ways that you could make a carbon. Let's say you could say to a little sheep and says harei zu oila or shlamim. So then this will be the shlamim. And that's called a nedava. When you're saying harei zu, this is. A neder means I take upon myself to bring the responsibility of bringing a carbon. So the Mishnah says, "Ein bein nedarim lenedavis." There's no difference whether you say that this animal is a neder, or I'm taking a neder to bring a carbon, or a nedava, or I say this animal should be a carbon. Ella, the difference is very simple. Shah nedarim, since nedarim, the responsibility is on you and your wallet. So even if you set aside an animal to bring a carbon and that animal got lost, chayev ba'achriyosan, you'd have to still obligate it in responsibility to replace it, because you took it upon yourself on your body or whatever it is, your being, that you're going to bring a carbon no matter what. So if it's lost, you're still obligating the responsibility. Unedava, but if you said this should be the carbon, so you're not chayev in responsibility. You only said this animal will be the carbon, but if the animal is lost or disappeared, you're not chayev to replace it. So the Gemara says, "Ha le'inyan bal ta'achar," regarding the halacha of bal ta'achar, zev shovin, they're both equal. That means the halacha is that if you make a neder to bring a carbon, you have to bring it within the first 3 Yom Tovim. You can't keep it forever. So they both would be equal in the chiyuv of bal ta'achar, because even though the din of bal ta'achar was only said by neder, we have an extra riboy that says even by an adava, you also have the obligation of baal ta'achar. Tanan Hasam, and the Gemara explains, Ezehu neder. What is called a neder? Ha'omer, if someone would say, Harei olai oila, I take responsibility to bring a carbon oila. He didn't separate an animal, so he's always responsible to make sure that a carbon is brought into the base of Migdash. Ezehi nedava. What's called a nedava? Ha'omer, if someone says, Harei zu oila, this animal should be an oila. So the Gemara says, "Ma bein nedarim ledavis." What's the difference between a neder and a nedava? Nedarim, a neder. If the animal is mesu, dies, or nignavu, or stolen, or avdu, got lost, chai be'achri yosen, you have to replace it because you took it upon yourself a responsibility to bring an animal to the base of Migdash. Nedavis, but if you only separated one animal specifically for a carbon, mesu, nignavu, avdu, if anything happened to them, they got died, they got stolen or lost, ein chai be'achri yosen, you're not responsible to replace it. So Gemara says, how do I know there's a difference between a neder and a dava? It seems obvious, but we have a pasuk. The Rabbanan says, "V'nir tzoloi." The pasuk says, if you do this, Hashem accepts your carbon, lechaper, to bring forgiveness, olav on you. So Reb Shimon says, Esh olav. If it was on olav, it means you took responsibility to bring a carbon. You're chayev to make sure that you get a kapara by bringing it onto the mizbeach. Then only if you take an olive type of neder that you took responsibility and said, I'm bringing a carbon, then you're chayev in the responsibility. But if you didn't take responsibility, you only said this should be a carbon, and then you're not chayev to responsible. That's why it says, when do you have to bring it onto the mizbeach to get a kapara? Olav, if you took a type of neder that you took responsibility of, then you don't get a kapara until you bring it on the mizbeach. But if you didn't take responsibility, then you probably get a kapara. You fulfilled your obligation, even if it got stolen or lost, because you only said harezu. This should be the carbon. My mashma. What does the word olav mean? Rabbi Yitzchak Badini explained, "Cave the Omar Olai." When you say I'm taking responsibility, command the toin akaspi dami. It's as if you're carrying it on your shoulder. You're taking full responsibility on and ensuring it so that you bring a carbon. That's what Olai means. New Mishnah. This Mishnah is in Taharas. We've experienced this before. A zav and a zav. What's a zav? A zav is somebody who has a discharge that looks like semen. Okay, but it comes from an aver that did not have any masturbation. It didn't become hard, so it just like flows like urine, but looks like semen. But it's not exactly like zera because it's a little bit. It's like not as sticky as zera. That's what a zav is. It's a sickness. I'm not sure what it's called, but the psukim say in Chumash that if you see it once, you're a tamei, and you go to the mikveh and you become tar like a balkari. But if you see it twice, so we're going to learn in our Mishnah, you become tamei. Not only tamei, but you have to have 7 days of purification. Whether you see it twice in one day or see it in 2 separate days, you have to have a 7-day purification process. If you see it for 3 times, then not only do you have to have 7 clean days that you have no seminal discharge, or we'll call it seminal discharge, but also you have to bring a carbon. Echad la'oila v'echad l'chatas. Now that is called the zav. By the way, there's something by a woman, the same thing. There's a certain time of the month, during the 11 days, she's not supposed to see a certain dam. By her, if she sees blood when she's not supposed to or expected to see blood, so there it has to do with days. If she sees dam, blood, for 3 days in a row, then she becomes a zava, and she also has to bring a carbon. But she can't, if she, unlike a man, the main thing is you see it, whether you see twice in one day or 3 times in one day. By a woman, it has to do with days. But the bottom line is, each one, after seeing it 3 times, this not normal discharge is obligated to bring a carbon. So that's the introduction. Very simple now. Ein Bain, there's no difference between Zav, Haroya Sterius, who sees the discharge twice, Leroya, if you see it, Sholish, 3 times. Ella carbon. This one has to bring a carbon. The one that sees it 3 times is obligated to bring a carbon. So the Mishnah says, Ha le'inyan mishkav v'moishav, this tuma called lying down or sitting down, usfira shiva, counting 7 clean days, zev shavan, both are equal, because Mishka v'moishav is a very interesting thing by this type of a tumah, that normally if you're an avatum, if you touch something, it should become a rishon. Here, if you sit down, let's say you sit down on a mattress, right? You lie down on 10 mattresses that are one on top of each other. The zav, when he gets off those mattresses, all those mattresses are avatumas. They are not rishon latomas, even though if he didn't touch them. Let's say he was wearing his pajamas, and he was wearing gloves. He didn't touch it. All of them, by just lying down on it, all of them become tamei. Not that one becomes a rishon and sheni shli. They all become av. So that's a severity that only found by a zav and a nida as well. So, but a zav shteirias and a zav that's 3, that is equal by them. The only difference is carbon. So the Gemara says, "Mano hali mili." How do I know that there's such a difference between a zav that sees twice or a zav that sees 3 times? The Tanu Rabban Rabbaver starts. Rab Simai Omer, Rab Simai says, if you look on the screen here, I'm just going to bring the psukim up. Here's the psukim. It's very simple. It's in Parshas Mitzorah. The Torah says, "Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Haran, speak to Bnei Israel, ish kiya zav mibsare." If you see something zav, the word zav means flowing from basare is a nice way of saying the oisei aver, where you urine. Zayvai, a flow, tame. So the Torah counts 2 times the word zav and says you're tame. So even if you have 2 flows, automatically you become tame. Then the Torah says, "V'zayis tia tumas b'zayvai." This should be the tuma of your zayv. Rar b'sarai, a discharge from your aver as zayvai. Hechtim b'sari, or if it stopped, if it like formed a seal on that aver, mizayve from yizayve to masihu. It's a pasuk. So it says zayv, 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 and it calls tuma, and it says zav, zav, and it calls tuma. So from here you see that there's 2 types of categories. That's what Rabbi Samai says. Let's go back into the Gemara. Mana hakasa shtaim ukroy tame. The Torah says twice the word zav and calls them your tame. Then the Torah writes the word shalish 3 times the word zav, ukroy tame, and he calls them tame. So there are obviously 2 categories. Haketzad, shtaim, if you see twice, l'tuma, you tuma, v'shalish l'karbon. If you see 3 times, you have to obligate it to bring carbon. So the Gemara says, ve'ema shtaim l'tuma v'loy l'karbon, shalish l'karbon v'loy l'tuma. Maybe you see twice, you have to tuma, but you don't have a carbon. But the 3 times, you have to bring a carbon and not tuma. You're not tame. So that's silly. Amrit, so the answer, you must have become tame by seeing it twice. So how can you tell me that when you get 3, you're not tame, you only have to bring a carbon? Obviously, twice you become tame. By the 3rd time, you're tame and you have to bring a carbon. So the Gemara says like this, the opposite. How do I know that? Maybe let's say shtayim l'karbon v'loy l'tuma. I'll say twice you have to bring a carbon and you don't have tuma. You just have to bring a carbon. Shalosh, but 3 times aflutuma, then you're a tame. So the Gemara says, Loisal Kadait. That cannot be, because the Torah says, the time we learned in a brisa, the chiper olav hakoyem lifnei Hashem mizoivai. There's another pasuk at the end that says you'll get a kapara after you bring the carbon mizoivai from those zavs that are supposed to bring a carbon. Mizayvai means some zavs bring a carbon, some don't. Mikta zavim may be in carbon, mikta zavim may be in carbon. Some do and some don't. Hakeitzad, how's that possible? Ra shalish, if you see 3 times, maybe. Shtayim einime, by 2 you don't bring. So the Gemara says, maybe it's the opposite. Ra bays, maybe. If you see 2, you have to bring a carbon. Ra shalish, if you see 3, einime, maybe you don't have to bring a carbon. So how's that possible? Amrit, that doesn't make sense. By the time you see 3, you're you already saw 2. So it must be by 2 times you don't have to bring a carbon. By 3 times you do have to bring a carbon. So now I have 2 drashas that teach you similar things. So the Gemara, that means that there are 2 categories: a zav bal shtei and a zav bal gimel riyos. So the Gemara says just simply, the Yitzrach, I need two psukim to teach you about the 2 categories. The Rab Samoi and the Yitzrach, I need to teach you Mizayve, the price of Mizayve, and what Rab Simai said. Why? The imid Rab Simai, if I just had Rab Simai, Hava Amina, I would have had a question, Kikushin. Maybe Shtayim is Lekarbin and not Tuma, and Sholish is Latuma. And Sholish is also Latuma. But so that's why I need to bring you Kamash Mila Mizayve. That means Mizayve teaches you that that there has to be two categories of carbon. Some do bring a carbon, some don't bring a carbon. According to where you learned without the Brisa, according to Rab Samai, every Zav has to bring a carbon. If you see two, you have to bring a carbon, but you might, and certainly three. So that's why I need the other Brisa that says no, mi zayvai. That means some bring a carbon, some don't bring a carbon. But if I just had that Brisa, I wouldn't know what defines the two categories. The im zayvai lo yadana kamer is. I wouldn't know how many times you have to see that defines the categories of carbon. Maybe 3 times does not bring a carbon, 4 times does. That's why I need the pasuk Kamash Mila Rab Samai. Rab Samai's drasha that tells you that there are only 2 categories in Zav. One that sees twice and one that sees 3 times. Again, the one that sees twice is only Tameh. One that sees 3 times of this discharge has to bring a carbon. So the Gemara says, Bahashta da amrat mizayva l'drasha. Now that you brought to the case of the word mizayvai teaches you a drasha that so the word mizayvai, the mem says we should darshan it. So let me bring you another pasuk. The pasuk says v'chiyitar hazav mizayvai, when a zav wants to become pure from his zayv. Now, what do you darshan from the word my darshabe? What do you darshan from his zav? From this word mizayvai. That means the pasuk is trying to tell you that sometimes all you need to mitar yourself is from the zav and nothing else. What does that mean? So the Torah is teaching you a big chiddush. Suppose a person is a zav and a metzora. A metzora, all you need to do, a guy who has a nega, in order for him to become pure, all he has to do is have the nega disappear. He doesn't have to count 7 days to become totally pure. A zav has to have 7 clean days, no discharge. So let's say you're tame as a zav and a nega. So you could still count your 7 clean days, even though you're not going to help yourself because you're still going to have the tumas nega. But once the nega disappears, automatically you become tame from the zav because you had 7 clean days of no discharge, no seminal discharge. So that's what it says. All you have to do is mizayve, get rid of the zav, and then wait till the nega disappears, and then you're free. That's what it says. You don't have to first have the nega disappear, and then the last thing that you're trying to clean up is the zav. No, you could actually clean up the zav first, and then have the nega disappear. You don't need to get both the zav and the nega to disappear at the same time. Then we darshan mizayve v'sofar. There's a pasuk at the end. Let's just bring it up. Here's a pasuk. V'chiyitar hazav mizayvai v'sofar loy shives yamim l'taharasai. That's one which we discussed. Now there's a pasuk that says you bring a carbon echad oila v'echad chatas, a chatas and an oila, and the pasuk here on the screen is v'chipur oleha koyin l'fnei Hashem mizayvai, mizayv tumasai. What are you darshan from this mizayv? That he gets a carbonus from zayv. If the whole parsha is talking about mizayv, what does this teach you? So the Gemara says, limeid, this teaches you zav bal shtei reish toin svir shiva, that if you see twice, you still have to count 7 days. Mizayve v'safar, from this pasuk, I'm sorry, from this pasuk, mizayve v'safar loy shivas yomim, you have to count 7 clean days. So what does that teach you? Well, I would have thought that you don't need a pasuk to teach me that a zav who sees twice has to count 7 days. In Metama Mishkav Moshev, once you told me he's such a strict tumah that his Mishkav Moshev become tamei, lo yehein time svir shiva. Of course, in order to become clean, he should have 7 days of clean discharge. So the Gemara answers, we go to Chesamid Beis, Shomeres Yoim Kinegi Yoim Techia. But by a woman, the first time she sees the dam during those 11 days, all she has to do is, although she's tamei and her mishka v'moishev is tamei, but she doesn't have to have 7 clean days. She could just watch 1 day, keep 1 clean day, corresponding to the day that she was tamei, and that's fine. Shemitama Mishka v'Moshev, she becomes Tame Mishka v'Moshev. Ve'ena to Unasir Yeshiva, she doesn't need to count 7 days. Va'af ata al tisma al zeh, don't wonder about this person, about Shteiriyas, Sha'afapi, I would have thought, Shemitama Mishka v'Moshev lo yehei Tam Tzvi Yeshiva, that he would not need to count 7 days. I would think you're right. He's Tameh, and he's Tameh Mishka v'Moshev. He's a serious Tumah, but maybe he doesn't need to count 7 clean days. Maybe only a Zav who sees 3 times need to count 7 clean days, not a Zav that has 2 days. Talmud Loima mizoivoi v'sofar, mikzah zoivoi v'sofar, limit that even if you saw a part of a Zav, means you saw 2 out of 3 days, you're still obligated to count 7 clean days. Limit azav bal shtei re'iyos, sheton svir shiva. Azav that sees 3 times, twice, even if you only see twice, you still need to count 7 clean days. So now, the Gemara is going to ask a question. We brought down 2 psukim that seem to say like this. Mizoy voy, this pasuk gimel on the screen, teaches you that even if you're a Zav, with Marba, a Zav that sees twice, has to count, even if you see twice, you also have to count 7 clean days. So this Mizayvoi includes, and Zmarba, even a Zav that sees twice has to count 7 clean days. Then we have this pasuk that says, for a carbon, Mizayvoi, only a 3 if you see 3 times, you have to bring a carbon. But if you see only 2 times, you don't have to bring a carbon. So this is mema'id. So how could it be the same word? Mizoivoi in this pasuk is marba, and this mizoivoi excludes from a carbon. That's the Gemara's question. Amalei Rapapa Labaya, Maishana mizoivoi. This mizoivoi, the merabele zobal shterios that you're saying it's marba a 2 times of. Or maishto, when it comes to carbon, mizoivoi, the mamai beze zobal shterios, that excludes a bal shterios. It seems to be the same word. And in different psukim, it means 2 different things. One is a marba word and one is a mamayit word. Amalei, so Rabbi answered back, it's very simple. Isal kadaitach, if the first case, when it comes to counting, if it's coming to exclude a zav bashterias that does not have to count 7 clean days, lema'uti yadasa, then I don't need it. Lishta kramine. Let the pasuk not say anything, not even write the word mizayvai, and I will automatically say that a zav bashterias does not have to count 7 days. You're going to say v'chitema asi medina. I might think he does have to count 7 days because it's a kal v'choyma. Shemeres yom keneged yom techiach. By a woman, we see that you could be a tameh with a mishka v'moshev, and you only need to count 1 day. So if the Torah would have been silent, not said 1 word, I would have automatically assumed that a sterias does not have to count 2 days. But now that the Torah writes the word mizayvai, it must mean that includes. It includes a zav balshteirias that he also has to count 7 days. But you're going to also so that's the question. So that proves that the word mizoivoi in that context must be a riboy. You're going to ask me a question, a side question. Even if you want to say it's a riboy, but I still need mizoivoi to teach you another din, that you only need to be tire yourself from the zav and not from the nega in case you had both. I need it for the other drasha, that you don't need to get clean from everything at one shot. You could just be clean from the zav and not from the nega. So in Cain, then I have another problem with the pasuk. In Cain lichtav hakra v'chiyitar hazav. Let the Torah write, let the zav become tahar, lishtoik, and be quiet. Mi zoivoi lamali. Why does the Torah have to write mi zoivoi? It could say v'yichtar hazav and be silent. Why does it say mi zoivoi? It needs to teach you that Ashdav Shteiriyos needs Shvir Shiva. So the 2 words, basically what the Gemara just said over here, that there are 2 words that are extra in this pasuk. You see pasuk Gimel. It could have said v'chiyater. If you become pure, then you have to count 7 days. So Hazav teaches you that you only have to be purified from the zav. Even if you're a tameh still with a nega, you're still fine. And Mizayvai teaches you a riboy, that not only Abzav Bal Shtei 3 riyas has to count 7 days, but even if you see twice, you also have to count 7 clean days. Okay, new Mishnah. Let's do another 3 minutes and then we'll stop. Okay, there's 2 types of mitzayris. as you know, in the Chumash, there's a called a Mitzayra was a quarantine Mitzayra. And then there's a confirmed Mitzayra, like you have COVID cases. So the quarantine Mitzayra is a person who has this white blotch, but he doesn't have the Siman Tumah that makes you a nega, which means he doesn't have 2 white hairs or good skin in the middle of this nega. So then they put you in quarantine. If the nega shrinks or doesn't grow in size, or you don't have any Siman Tumah, you go free. But a Mitzayra that's confirmed Mitzayra, he has a real nega, a white blotch with the simonim of white hairs or something, then he's a confirmed case of Mitzayra. So what's the difference between a quarantine Mitzayra and a confirmed case of Mitzayra? So the Mishnah says, Ein bein Mitzayra muzgar le Mitzayra muchlit. There's no difference between a quarantine Mitzayra and a confirmed Mitzayra. Ella priya or prima. A confirmed Mitzayra has to rip his, has to do kriya like an ovel and has to let his hair grow because he has to do tshuva for the aveira of lashon hara that caused this nega. A quarantine Mitzayra, he's not sure if he's a Mitzayra, he doesn't have to do that. And also a Mitzayra muchlat also has to wear a mask, by the way. Ein bein tar mitoich hezger letar mitoich hechlit, but the way to go free, a hezger, all he has to show that it didn't grow and he has no Siman Tumah, and they let him go free. But a confirmed Mitzayra goes free, he has to dikalachas, he has to shave his entire body with a razor blade, vitziparim, and he has to bring two birds that they shecht outside where he is outside the walled city. He's staying by himself. As you know, Mitzayra lives by himself. Both of them have to live by themselves outside the city, but Mitzayra is easier once he's declared free. Let's do one more minute. They both have to be sent outside the walled city. Mitzayra musgar and Mitzayra muchlat. How do I know that? The Torah says by a quarantine Mitzayra musgar that when he doesn't have any tumah anymore, when he has no siman tumah, then the kohen should make him tar, and he goes to the mikveh and he washes his clothing. Tar prima de mikara. Tar implies he was always tar. So we see that Mitzayra musgar was always tar. From what? From priya prima, that he never had to rip his clothing or grow his hair. That's vitar, means he was. It turns out he was always tar. Amalei Rava. So Rava says, you were mean the word vitar means that you were always tar. That's not true. Elamiata gabezav diksid dechibes v'gad v'taher. Azav. The Torah also uses the word v'taher, and therefore certainly he was tamei beforehand. Hasamai v'tar miyakari ika. How could you translate the word v'taher means he was always tar? So the word vitar doesn't mean you will turned out that you will always tar. Elatar hashtabelitame klicheres behaset, that a zav is no more metame anymore. So vitar means you're now from now on you become tari. After the chazi like metame, I'm afraid. Even if he becomes a zav again, he didn't metame anything during the period that he was tar. Hachanami, same thing by Mitzayra musga. Tar hashtem mafreya. That means that the Mitzayra musga becomes tar from now on, but it doesn't show me that he was always tar, and that certain halachas that were by Mitzayra muchlat did not apply by Mitzayra musgar. El Amar Rava says like this. There's another pasuk. It says in the pasuk, "Batzurua ashaboy hanega." If you're a confirmed Mitzayra and you had the nega, you have to rip your clothing. So there, the Chumash says, "Boy." If you're confirmed Mitzayra, then you have to rip your clothing. You're not a confirmed, it's not a tzaras for sure in your body. You just have to wait days of quarantine. So there, that the Torah has a miyut that says that a Mitzayra musgar does not have to do priya prima. If that's true, call yameash negabo yitma. So it says that a Mitzayra muchlat has to be sent out of the city. So it's mashma only a confirmed Mitzayra is sent out. I would darshan the same way. Would you say that if someone who is not a confirmed Mitzayra does not have to be sent out? But to be sent out of the city, and not only that, to be metama just by walking into a room, it seems that they're both equal, a Mitzayra musgar and a Mitzayra muchlat. So how do you darshan this boy in that case? Oh, Malay, there's a reboy. There's a reboy that says yamei kol yamei. all the days. You see, it says Kol Yemei, you have to be thrown out of the city. What is the Kol Yemei? All types of mitzoros are thrown out of the city. So that they also have to be sent out. One last question. When a mitzora gets free, so why isn't a quarantine mitzora required to shave off his whole body and bring birds? There's a difference. Why is hechlet, a confirmed mitzvah, have to bring teglachas and tziborim, and a non-confirmed does not have to bring teglachas and tziborim? That's another pasuk. That when the Torah says that you have to shave your head, you have to take a teglachas and tziborim. It says it that by a mitzvah that became healed. Oh, so if your nega has to be healed, that's when you have to do teglachas and tziborim. That we exclude a mitzvah muskar she'ain tzarat tluy b'rfuis. He's not getting healed. El biyamin. He just has to wait out the days of quarantine. So although he's like a mitzvah, but he doesn't have to do priya prima, and we learned also that he doesn't have to do teglachas and tziborim. But regarding sending out of the city, both a mitzvah musgar and a mitzvah mukla both have to be sent out of the city. Okay, we discussed a lot today. Tahara is wow.
That was a lot.
Zavim, Taharas, Kehelim, Nadarim. So this is one of those.
Now I know where to go. I now know where to go for the summaries of a couple of masechtas.
Right.
A little bit.
This is what it is. I just don't know. I don't know what a zav is in English. What is the medical?
I think I went over this already, and someone asked because I was a physician. It sounds to me like it's. I don't know exactly, but because we also had a urologist in the chevra, I think it's like more of like a urethritis, like maybe some type of inflammation or bacterial infection that you have a discharge, but it's not semen.
But it looks like semen. It has to look like
semen. It could be like pussy and look like semen. It could be white. Right. It's not sticky because it's not semen. It's not from the seminal vesicles. So it's like a urethritis. So, it's very hard to distinguish sometimes.
Right. I'm just curious where it develops and things like that. It's not like a mitzvah. It doesn't exist anymore. There's no such a thing of a leprosy like was in the Chumash.
No, first of all, there's
the white leprosy.
Thing about mitzvah being leprosy. It's not really. Mitzvah it's more like maybe a fungal infection because it's on the walls. It could be on a wall. Right. Leprosy does not exist on a wall.
Right.
You got fungus on a wall. Okay.
Right.
So I don't think that's leprosy. Okay. I don't think that is.
Right.
I think there's a whole thing Indian about this. Someone discussed it, but I think it's urethritis, and I'll look into it again. I think I might have some notes somewhere, but I'll come back.
Okay.
Yeah, but those emissions do occur, and what happens is the seminal vesicles fill up, and then the semen comes out, and it gets mixed with the urine, so it's neither here nor there. But it has nothing to do with the person causing it. It's a natural physiological reaction sometimes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Instead, the first time, I think the second time, if you have a reason why it came. Because of a sickness, you don't become tamei. I remember in Mishnah Zavim, it says that if you can say a reason why it came, then you don't become tamei.
Yeah.
And what about the third time? You have to bring a korban, but if you don't have a reason why it came.
Oh no! By the third time, no excuse is accepted. So even if you have a reason, you'd still require to bring a korban. So in other words, to get to number 2, you have to be free of reasons. If you have a reason, then you don't reach number 2. You're not considered a tamei. But once you're at 2, then the third one, it doesn't matter how it happened. You have obligated to be. You're a 3, and now you have to bring a korban.
Yeah.
Very complicated. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
A good nacht, everybody.
A good nacht, Boris.
Yeah, Brukum Tia. Okay.